Welcome to the farm.
Welcome to the farm. I'm Justin, and we are still working on our Duramax head gasket swap. But we're at a really exciting point. In the last video, we started bolting parts back on the engine. We left off with getting the rear EGR bolts in the back of the passenger side head in, which were very difficult bolts to get in. Today we're going to finish bolting in that rear EGR and see what else we can get into. Let's get started. So trying to get some of the more difficult stuff out of the way, the next thing I want to do is try to get these exhaust flanges bolted to the exhaust manifold, because getting those bolts out was really a pain. But the first thing I want to do is I want to clean up the threads on the bolts because they got a little bit rusty. If I was smart, I would have cleaned out the threads on the exhaust manifold too before I put the head back in. But I didn't think about that at the time, and it's a little bit too late now. So we'll go ahead, we'll get the bolts cleaned up and start putting them in. And so we can go ahead and slide the gasket in. See if we can get some of these bolts started. Well, that was extremely frustrating. It took a long time to get that back bolt in there. In fact, I had to have my wife come out and adjust the flange, try to get it in. But once we got it started, it threaded right in, tightened right down, got the other bolts in. This side is done. Let's head over to the other side and see if we can't get that done. So I'm fully anticipating the driver's side here being a lot more difficult than the passenger side, just because I have all these wires, lines, steering column. Flange is right back here. I don't know how well you guys can even see it, but it's gonna be really hard to get that gasket in there and get these bolts started. All right, so I got two of the bolts tight. I'm gonna go up underneath with a socket and a long extension to get that bottom bolt. Oh man, that was a pain in the butt. That took almost 3 hours to get the 4 bolts in on that side and the 3 bolts in on this side for those exhaust manifolds. But we finally got it done. They're in, they're tight. Let's move on to something else. So the next thing we're going to install on the driver's side is the low pressure fuel return line. And unfortunately, when I was taking it apart, some of the parts were a little brittle, like all the little locking tabs broke out of every single one of these things. Top broke off of this one. The little snap-on piece completely broke on this one. So I'm going to have to replace it, which stinks because the new part was $200 and that was the cheap one. But we're going to go ahead, throw a new one on here and see if we can't get it on the truck. All right, let's go put it on. All right, so we got our fuel return line all tied in on our passenger side here. I think our next step is to get all of our injector and glow plug wiring harness back in place. So I got all my injectors clicked in the right order. 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm going to go ahead and start working on my glow plugs. Before I actually bolt them down though, I'm going to take a little bit of sandpaper and just clean up the surface here. Make sure I get a good connection. So we got our glow plugs in. 1, 2, 3, 4. We know those are all in the right spots. Everything's lining up, bolting in properly. I think we're good down here. So next thing I'm going to do is get this fuel filter and fuel primer bracket bolted onto the head. I missed the wire hold down that goes on that bolt as well. So now I'm just going to work on connecting the plugs for this wiring harness up here in the top. So the next thing I want to install is the fuel filter assembly along with the primer here. Before I do that, I want to go ahead and replace this filter since I got it out. I think it's going to be a lot easier to do now. We're going to lubricate the new O-ring with a little bit of clean engine oil. Now the directions say we should fill this filter before we put it on the truck, but since we're completely disconnected from the truck, I'm not going to do that at this point, just because it's all going to spill out as I move this thing around to get it back into the truck. All right, now we can go put that in the truck. All right, so I think we got our passenger side as far as we need to go for now. Now we need to concentrate on getting the stuff in the center here done and the stuff on the driver's side head done. We're going to start by bringing the fuel lines across the center here. That's got to go in here. That's got to get underneath that. So now I got those fuel lines pretty much taken care of. We're going to go ahead and reinstall this turbo coolant line. So next I got to try to install this fuel line bracket. I should have put it in before I tightened these lines down, but we're going to see if we can sneak it in anyway. So up next, start installing our injector lines. So next we're going to work on our low pressure return for our fuel. All right. All right, so the next thing we're going to do is work on getting the wiring harness back in. So we're going to tuck this up underneath here. That goes up there. That's all our glow plugs and stuff. There we go. For the glow plug wires, we're going to do the same thing we did on the other side. We're going to clean off the contact surface. And all right, so I got all the injector lines hooked up, verified all my numbers, they're all correct. Same thing with my glow plugs. So I think what we're going to do now is just kind of finish up putting together some of this wiring harness up here. So next we can hook up our main fuel line feed and return to the tank. And I believe that should just snap right in. Well, it's starting to thunder and I think it's going to rain here pretty soon, so we're going to call this one quits for today. We did make a lot of good progress though. We got the fuel system pretty much all buttoned up, I believe. And we got all the wiring on both sides of the heads were completely done. So it feels really good to be this far. In the next one, we'll work on starting with the intake crossover tube and start putting some really big pieces back on this engine, and it's really going to look like we're making some progress. Hopefully you guys found this interesting. I just want to say thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next one. Bye.